Everybody, we're going to talk about how to come up with your next big idea. That's a pretty big thought, right? I had a hard time coming up with the first slide, but if you can't figure that out, you go back to the basics of dad. This is my dad. This is how he looked to me when I was 5 years old, and essentially, he asked me a lot of questions, which is a little bit different than how I typically was or most children grow up. And essentially, they ask a lot of questions about why is the sky blue? Why is that doorknob shaped the way it is? Why is the auditorium ceiling that shape? So this is him bringing over a hermit crab to me as a 5-year-old, asking me, why do you think this shell? Why does he have a shell? So these are all the questions that literally I had to answer all my life growing up. I had to answer, why is this actually shaped this way? If this doorknob was too big, my hand couldn't go around it. If this was too small, I couldn't actually turn it. So then that's kind of a problem, right? So I essentially was thinking about how to think through these problems. Why are things the way they are? And that also took me to another study that I found recently about a paperclip. So this paperclip study was about divergent thinking, about thinking outside of the box. And essentially, it was a longitudinal study. Basically means that they tested a bunch of people over a course of time, and they looked at this paperclip, and they asked, what can you do with this paperclip outside of it being paperclip? So a normal person might be able to come up with 5 to 6 different uses for this paperclip. Of genius levels of divergent thinking, of thinking outside of the box, they might be able to come up with 100+ different types of ways to come up to use this paperclip. So they first tested this on 5-year-olds. 5-year-olds, 98% of these 5-year-olds were able to come up with genius level ways of thinking about how they would use this paperclip and what they could do. They started asking questions. Could it be really, really big? Could it be really, really tiny? Could it be made out of rubber? Can we shape it into different types of animals? Or, in tons of creative ways that nobody really thought about. And they were able to come up with 50 to 100 different types of ways to use this paperclip. As they did the study further on, at age 10, it dropped down to 50% of the people were actually thinking in a very, very creative manner. So, as you can see, there's going to be a trend. They kept testing them into adulthood, and it dropped, and it dropped, and it dropped. And what that means is we start looking at the world a very particular type of way. We start seeing the paperclip as a paperclip, instead of looking at what can we actually do with this paperclip. These are kind of our core building blocks of what could be, but we stop asking these questions. And that's a moment that we have to talk about in education. We can make changes. But more importantly, I want to go back to the basics and look at being a kid again. So this is something that you guys might be familiar with. Legos are a toy that I grew up with and I really loved. And this is what Legos looked like back in the 80s. Essentially a bunch of blocks that were thrown out, and you could build whatever you want, different colors, different types of shapes. It was very, very fun. And then I've got to say, 2014, they've come up with really cool stuff to build with Legos as well. There's spaceships, there's shuttles, there are airplanes and race cars. It's very cool. You go down the toy aisle and you see all of these things that you can build. But I also equate this to kind of what it's like growing up. We start looking at these things that have already been built. We get a little instruction manual that says, hey, go and build this dream. Go and build somebody else's creation. Here are the instructions on how to do that. And while I think that's also really, really cool because I love space shuttles, but what's also very important that is missing out of the creative process is going back to the basics and asking, what can I build with the pieces I have? And oftentimes, with trying to build somebody else's dreams, you also realize that you may not have all the pieces to build it. It's very easy going into adulthood and looking into Time magazine and Forbes and looking at the cover and seeing, wow, Mark Zuckerberg built Facebook. This is amazing. I want to be like him. Or Steve Jobs. And looking at Apple, this is really, really cool. This is somebody else's creation. And we may not have the tools to try to build it the way they built it. And so that's why I'm challenging you guys also to think of the core of how can I work with the pieces that I have in my life to be able to build something that's very, very unique, very inspiring, and very mine. So a big idea that comes from me and looking at the blocks that I have. So I want to first look at a couple of blocks that are put out here in technology. These have a couple of terms: business, internet, online dating, chat, social, GPS. I mean, these are all terms that are pretty big within technology. You might open up a newspaper, you might read a couple of these. These are all building blocks that will create tomorrow's future, and it will also be in the past. There are billion-dollar ideas already built out of these blocks, and there will still be billion-dollar ideas tomorrow that will be built out of the same exact blocks here. You have to go and create it. It's up to us to create that future. There's the next steps. If we do not create it, I promise you, somebody else will go out there and claim that billion-dollar idea, but it can start from right here. So we're going to look at a couple of these. So like if you pick like internet and social and maybe photos, and we ask, what does that look like when we put these pieces together? Sometimes we might find things that have already been built, like Facebook. That's, already there. There's a lot of then, copycats and all kinds of different companies building the same types of things, trying to improve on it little by little. But let's go back. So let's look at, let's say, GPS, education, and food. Well, food and education, well, maybe I can learn how to eat better, or maybe I can learn how to cook. Or maybe I can add GPS in here, and that's kind of like step-by-step guidance. So if you put those together and you ask yourself, what does that look like when you put these pieces together? You have to ask yourself, connect the dots, right? The pieces are there, connect the dots, and ask yourself, look at the child that looks at these toys and looks at these Legos and says, what can I create with these actual pieces? So putting that together, this is actually my project, is Sidechef. So we put together essentially a product that teaches people how to cook step by step the way GPS would. It shows, step-by-step instructions, timers, but essentially the design came out of looking at these components that we knew were really cool. And it was food education. It was teaching people how to cook. But again, this idea, it's already there now, right? So we want to keep thinking, what could be cool? Let's come up with something original that hasn't been done before, right? So we have the same blocks on the screen. Let's look at chat and location-based services. Chat, very big right now. There is Snapchat, there is WhatsApp, lots of big purchases, lots of headlines going on in the newspapers, right? So chat, been done. Location-based services, that's like checking in. You can check into Yelp, you can check into DMPing, you can check into lots of different types of technologies, right? So what does that look like? Okay, location-based check-in with chat. Maybe I walk into Suzhou and I'm like, hey, I automatically get checked into a place and I can start having a conversation with all of you guys. Or maybe I walk into the TED Talk and I'm like, whoa, like these are all the people that are talking to me now because this is one big chat room, right? That's one way to take it. Imagine if you walked into a place, you checked in, you can have those types of conversations based on local proximity. But let's keep adding to this, right? Let's add business. I mean, that's a big one, right? Business is also a good place if you want to make some money out of your idea at some point. So now imagine checking into a place. Where could I go that I would want information kind of delivered to me? Maybe I walk into IKEA or a grocery store, and all of a sudden I get a notification saying, may I help you? Now I have this phone, may I help you? And essentially, the IKEA staff knows that I'm in this store, I've checked into this chat room, and they have now, helped me out with customer service. I can figure out, well, where do I need to go? Well, I'd like to buy that, bunk bed over, I've seen it in a catalog somewhere. Maybe we can add in another piece. How about GPS? We talked about GPS before, but maybe we can talk about where can I find that piece? Maybe they shoot me a little map, and I just follow this map, and they're chatting with me and tells me exactly where to go. I know exactly how to do customer service now inside IKEA. But let's go back to something else. So we've done business, and we have the kind of business application showing me around, maybe new age of customer service, revolutionizing what that might look like. Let's add something that is a little more popular, social. Social is very, very popular. Social media, social just being social. Maybe I might think about what are some cool interests that I have? A couple interests, 5 interests, Maybe it matches with other people's interests within that chat room now. I can walk into TED and I can talk about, well, I'm interested in education or art or technology, and instantly will ping you with other people who are also interested in these things. I can get into these conversations. We should be using technology to facilitate how we can do what we normally do even better. That's something that's pretty cool that comes out as social. But what are some other applications? Let's keep going with this, right? Let's keep adding blocks to what we are building. That's the most fun part when you're a kid. Online dating, that's pretty popular. Pretty popular around the whole entire world, right? Like, online dating is also a business that makes quite a bit of money and gets a lot of eyeballs on. So online dating, how would I add this with location-based services? Well, immediately I can think already, like if you go to a bar or a restaurant or a club and you want to go meet somebody. I've got to say, I've seen more and more phones open up these days in clubs, and more people are talking on their messenger apps. And imagine if you were talking with people that, well, you're at this club, you might want to meet somebody new, and you can actually engage in a conversation. And you start talking to that guy or that girl that is somewhere in this club, you share some interests, that's pretty cool. What happens after that? Can we actually add in some more pieces on top of this too? Deals. Well, deals, I think, let's see, what would deals look like? If we put deals with this as well, I'm probably going to ask that person for, to buy a drink, like, hey, would you like a drink? Well, I go up to the bartender. The bartender already now knows that I am wanting to buy a drink because I'm having such a great conversation with this person. And he says, oh, this is on the house, or hey, it's buy one, get one free, or hey, we'll start happy hour a little bit earlier for you. Because now they can actually be a part of that process of what's actually happening. But you see, this is just adding on new pieces and asking yourself, what would that look like? This is, from what I understand, technology that isn't there. There's nobody building this exactly right now. And again, you might come up with something that somebody else has already built, but that's okay. What do kids do? They break everything. They start over. They're not afraid to start over. They might build something that might not look so pretty at first, but they get much better at working with the pieces that they have. So I want to share with you guys a quote that I really, really love. And this is from Henry David Thoreau. And essentially, he says, if you've built castles in the air, that's okay. That's absolutely okay. Now you have to build the foundations to hold them up. And we've talked about the pieces so far that are the communal pieces. This is what everybody has to play with. And this is where the big ideas happen. But now, how do I make that happen into reality? How do I build the foundations that hold up that castle? So then we get to look at the next kind of pieces. The communal level is at the very top. This is where these are all the pieces that everybody in the world's working with. These are the pieces that show up in the newspaper. These are the challenges and solutions that are coming out all over the place. The network level and the individual level is also the levels in which execution happens. This is where you build. This is how you build to a great idea. Steve Jobs had a great idea. Zuckerberg had a great idea. They chose their own paths to actually get up there and to facilitate that idea into a reality. So the network level is actually the level in which this is where everybody in your network, everybody around you, everybody in this room essentially has resources and has skill sets and has passions and has dreams is for you to start engaging and to talk and to see what pieces can be built with the pieces that you have into something really, really great. Individual level is your own passions, your own skills, your own resources that are at your hand. You might have more time, or you might have some money, or you might have some experience that you can actually offer to this particular project or dream. And it's kind of figuring out, how, again, those fit together, asking yourself the question, what does that look like when we put these pieces together? So also, now looking at a little more detail at the network level, this is my own particular network. This is when I transitioned from my first company to my second company, Sidechef. And with Sidechef, I was looking, originally I was building mobile games. This was after Blizzard, World of Warcraft, and then mobile games. And then, I started asking myself, people are building mobile games. What is something that is new and big that would be really cool, that would get a lot of people excited to be able to build? And so I started looking at what was around me. What are the pieces that I had to play with? Like I had programmers around me. I knew how to work with programmers. I knew how to work with designers. I knew how to work with investors because I'd started up my first company. But it's again, as you grow, you also be accumulating more pieces into what you're working with. Again, don't be afraid to start over, kind of put those pieces together, see how that would arrange. Individually, actually, to keep on going with the network side, sometimes you have to add pieces that you actually need to be able to keep building as well. So for me, building Sidechef, well, I didn't have chefs. Actually, I didn't even really know how to cook. That was kind of kind of an issue. On the individual level, so one of the pieces I have is an embarrassing cooking experience. And that is also could be a piece because it was a motivation. I tried to cook for an ex-girlfriend, emphasizing ex there, and it didn't go too well. And so, I thought, wouldn't it be cool if there was this app that actually told you what to do, puts a timer on there, makes sure, you don't burn anything. But other pieces that I had, I was an entrepreneur. I had a real big passion to build. I was very keen on design and thinking about new ideas and wanting to build off of these strengths that I had. And so putting those together, that is how I came up with Sidechef. That's how I led to build this bigger dream of mine. And this is one example of how you can go forward and build some of this. But also, you can look at, famous people who, have built bigger things with Facebook, like Zuckerberg. And you can look at, again, he had a dream of making the internet social, getting your social lives up in the internet, right? If you were a different person, even if you were to go back in time, and we told you this idea ahead of time, you would still have to figure out how will you make this a reality. You cannot go and try to build it the way they do. It will be different. He was in Harvard at the time. He was at Harvard, and he was, very, unhappy, perhaps, this is all from the movies, unhappy with his social life, right? And he also was a programmer. He took the skills that he had, and he started building. He came up with an idea at first called Face Mash. That was the first iteration. But again, he looked at the pieces that he had, and he broke it apart, and he restarted again. He was still going after the same dream, but he was recreating with the pieces that he has. Don't be afraid to keep trying. If it doesn't work the first time or the second time, you're still working with the pieces. You're adding more pieces in your life to continuously build. Steve Jobs is another great example. He wanted to make a big impact. He wanted to build a dream. And essentially, he took what he had, which was, he was very good with tech. He often talks about his calligraphy classes back in school where he learned calligraphy and really appreciated the arts and design. And you start putting these pieces together, what did he create at first? He created the first computer that had typography and different types of fonts that really cared about design in word processing. This was well before when he then created the iPod and then the iPhone. So again, find your own kind of way to get there. So I also want to talk about with the network and individual level. It's very important. You guys right here have all the pieces, just as I was talking before, to build the next billion-dollar ideas. Look to your left, look to your right. These are all people that have the same types of ideas. You guys are all here. Ask them. From what I understand, you guys have founders, designers, students, artists, programmers, lots of different tools and blocks that you can actually put together to build something really, really great. So I challenge you, go and build something unique. Go and build something of your own, and build something really, really great. Thank you.